One of the Philippine Star. Good evening, LCV.
Good evening, Roby. Hi.
LCV.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, yes, despite the sad news. But let's try to remember, ito, magbistuhan tayo. What were you doing as a journalist nung presidente si FVR?
Alam mo, si FVR, napakadaling kausapin. He was always where the action was. He would go where, yung tipong pag may calamity, he would go there, and he would be so accessible. It wasn't hard to get him to talk to you. You know what I mean?
Oo.
Para siyang every man's president, at least for journalists, no? Parang napakadaling kausap. He was always so jolly. And walang baggage. Yung ganun ang impression ko, walang baggage. And he was always joking about, of course, I remember for a long time, I could not believe that he was wearing glasses without glasses. I mean, he was wearing eyeglasses without the salamin. And yung parang I remember interviewing him and wondering, meron ba? Of course, natapos yung debate because he would poke a finger nga. He poked a finger into his glasses to show nga na wala talaga salamin. So, nakakatuwa. Anong klase?
Ito, kasama na natin si Ami. Ami, ikaw, nung journalist ka, nung presidente si FBR, what were you doing?
Hindi. Nung umpisa, nung panahon ni Cory, nung hindi pa siya presidente, masungit siya. Ayaw nga namin i-interview, snap patas. Pero,
talaga serious.
Oo, nakakainis. Pero nung umpisa, under Korean, pero nung tatakbo na siyang presidente, biglang bumait, natuto.
Diba?
Hindi na nawala.
Yes, parang nag-prep up siya, di ba, for the role. And parang where before he was quite inarticulate, di ba?
Yes.
Parang starts magsalita. Nung naging presidente, biglang parang, ang bilis-bilis, napaka-articulate bigla. He could express his thoughts fluently.
Nakikipagbiruan na siya.
Nag-aral. Yung ganon.
Ako, sisingit ako ng FBR anecdote ko mamaya. Kahit hindi ako nag-cover ng Malacanang. Pero mamaya, because we have somebody who can tell us a lot more insights about Fidel V. Ramos, the president, and also the man we have with us, Senator Frank Drilon. Senator, welcome to the Chiefs.
Roby, thank
Good evening, sir.
To your show. Ami, good evening.
Hi.
Luchi, hi. Nice to see you again. But before anything, I want to place in perspective. Ami was the leader of the Black Pac. And Ramos was
Ayan na.
In Malacanang, I was the executive secretary.
Yes.
Ramos was defense. And Ami, I think, was the president of the Barak Pac. That's what we call the Malacanang reporters who would hound us every day. Anyway, that's a little tidbit.
But Senator, kanina pinakilala nga natin Steady Eddie. Bakit Steady Eddie?
Because he you don't see him rattled. One of the things that people will remember of President Ramos is the fact that he stood by democracy. All the 7 coups d'etats that we witnessed, he was there. And I'm talking from personal experience. I saw how stable he was. He does not panic. And he thinks clearly through the very tense situations, and that's why he's called stabilizer in chief. And that means, as I said, he stood by the principles of democracy. This is not written, but if you remember, there was a shooting incident involving a Colonel de Guzman in the Magallanes parking lot. And it was a related to a drug bust. And Colonel de Guzman was a classmate of President Ramos, a classmate of Rene de Villa, a classmate of Ramon Montaño, all those big shots in the armed forces. And it was so tense because on the other side of the fence was Alfred Lim, the NBI director then, who's a guy, if I'm not mistaken, Hylock, was the one charged. And you can imagine the tension between two armed groups, and President Cory and I were caught in the middle of it, but President Ramos was very steady, and he calmed all the frayed nerves as a result of this. And these are just one of the incidents where he showed his capacity to think clearly through crisis, and this has this has served us well as a country.
Senator, you were so closely allied, of course, with Cory Aquino. Siguro you can tell us more about her selection of Ramos as her successor, no? Kasi, of course, we all know,
Over Mitra.
created a rift
Yeah.
between her and a very close friend, the Mitra family.
Yes, it was an agony for President Cory. It was a very difficult process. As you correctly said, President Cory was very close to the Mitra family. Her brother, Pipinco Juanco, was from Monsing Mitra. The only governor with Cory then was Douglas Cagas of Davao del Sur, and but she did it by herself with the minimum of consultation from people like me. She made a decision and she thought that the best person to lead our country afterwards, after her term, would be President Ramos. And these instructions to me were very specific. I was directed by President Cory to make sure that there is peaceful transfer of power from President Cory to Fidel Ramos. It is very important. It was very important because you remember that there was no experience on the part of the government in transferring power. It was Marcos for many years, and it was the first transfer of power, and therefore we had to ensure that that it is done well and that it will not cause any instability in the fragile situation that we were there. But in credit to President Ramos, he really did everything to make sure that the transition is as smooth as it happened.
So whose idea was it originally to pick Ramos as the successor? Did he apply, or would Cory really wanted him?
It was Cory's decision. It was Cory's decision. As I would repeat, the president, the closest political advisor of the president then was Congressman Pipinco Juanco, who was close to Monsing Mitra. And the LDP then had a very strong bench, very deep bench. They were able to field 24 strong candidates for senator. And Cory made that decision alone, and it was her judgment that Ramos would be the best person to succeed her in the presidency, and it was, and she was correct, because President Ramos, he was a soldier by profession, and yet he was the one who pursued the peace process with all sincerity and aggressiveness. I am talking from experience. I was part of the peace panel together with the late Heidi Yorak. We talked to Juba Season in Utrecht together with Ambassador Howard D. We talked to the Gringo Nasan upon the direction of Ramos, and we talked to the Muslims in Mindanao. And all of this showed the capacity of President Ramos to see the bigger picture. It was not unusual that people would think, hey, this guy is led by Gringo Hunasan, nearly toppled this government, did not believe in the democratic process. And yet, President Ramos was firm in his belief that the only way that he could preserve democracy is to make peace with all of those who tried to topple our democratic system.
Actually, ang daming nagulat nga sa kanya, sir, dahil, everybody knew him to be a military man. And everybody knew him to be part of the Marcos administration because he was head of the PN or the PC at that time, no? And everybody thought, oh, what's a military man doing being endorsed by a Cory Aquino? So parang, to be sure, there were so many challenges that he had to overcome, no? And then when he won, remember Miriam Santiago kept saying, akin yan but FDR stole it. So parang ang dami niyang, from the get-go, no? Ang dami niyang kailangan ma-overcome to prove himself worthy. How was it with him during that time?
He was steady. That's why he was called Steady Ramos, because he does not get shaken by all of these issues. Political noise is the least of his worries. Can you imagine facing a coup 7 times? And the other thing that people do not remember, was that President Ramos was leading the country during the Asian crisis in 1997, and
the energy crisis.
Oh, actually,
crisis. As soon as he came in, and then a few years into his term, the Asian crisis, which caused a lot of problems for economy, and yet he was able to wither all of this. And if we are able today, Ami and Luchi, we are able to talk freely, I think we should not forget that President Ramos was a key player in the EDSA revolution, which allowed us to regain our freedoms.
Oo nga. Kanina nga, Senator, kausap ko si Manny Mugato, isa pang institusyon sa coverage ng Malacanang. And I asked him that, di ba? Sabi ko, alam naman natin mga pag-uusapan natin. We'll talk about EDSA, we'll talk about Philippine Constabulary, the peace process. But sabi ko, what do people forget? And he pointed out the energy crisis. He said, tandaan natin, 12-hour brownouts during that time. Cory was getting a lot of criticism for not building the infrastructure, not investing in that. He brought in power barges that were very controversial, very expensive.
IPPs.
We had to bring online coal-fired power plants, Masinloc, Calaca. I remember all of that. I mean, talk to us about the fact that, one thing that people forget, he's a civil engineer as well. What did that do to his leadership and to his discipline?
It was a challenge. You see, he was being criticized right and left, including the fact that he purchased power as allegedly much more in excess of what the country needed. But he had the vision of anticipating that precisely we need power in order to move forward. It was a chicken and egg question. If we don't have enough power, we won't move. That is why he made that very firm decision. He pushed for the Emergency Powers Act to assume full responsibility, but ask for the appropriate powers be granted to him under the Emergency Powers Act in order that he can firmly make decisions which in his view will solve our power problem at that time. And it was not an easy episode. He was criticized. And afterwards, if you recall, after his presidency, he was summoned by the Blue Ribbon Committee of the Senate Among the issues precisely was the power plants that
Yes.
were put up during his time, and the fact that there were even assertions that these are crony friends of his from the United States, who he met while he was there schooling. I tell you, a man of lesser, how would you call it, character may have melted in all the problems that confronted him. Again, I would repeat, Cory restored democracy, but it was President Ramos who really strengthened the institutions of democracy. He defended these institutions of democracy when he was a member of the cabinet, but when he became president, he strengthened them so that today there is no threat to our democratic system of government.
Yeah. How, at the end of the day, and ang dami natin pinag-uusapan, but at the end of the day, how do you think history will remember him?
He would be remembered very well. I am saying that with confidence. Historians will pay tribute to President Ramos for what he has done for our country and our people. First, as I said, he stood by the side of democracy and resisted all temptations to take over. He maintained the principle that democracy is the best way of life for us. Second, having provided political stability, he provided political stability by trying to bring all those who tried to bring down this government into society. You talk about Gringo Honasan and his group, the RAM. You talk about Bizwari. You talk about Joe Masison. All of this he sought out, notwithstanding his military background. And talking about that, I was the Justice Secretary, and I saw it close from my perspective. He was a law and order guy, but he made sure that people will not lose confidence in the way our laws were enforced, because he knew that, and he really believed that to strengthen our people's faith in our democracy, we must strengthen our justice system and exert every effort to make sure that the ordinary man would believe that no matter how poor you are, you're going to have justice in this country. And, when I was Justice Secretary, he gave me all the support in order that we can succeed in our mandate to enforce the law.
Senator, tell us about his, he will not admit that he was behind it, but his supporters were pushing for PIRMA, diba, the People's Initiative to amend the Constitution. And he was saying, 6 years is a long time for a bad president, but too short for a good one. Kaya lang, it was, Cory Aquino led the opposition to the PIRMA, diba? Maybe you can tell us more about it. Sabi ni Cory noon, hindi naman niya sinabing, Eddie, there's life after the presidency, but that's what she said, diba? There's life after the presidency.
Looking back, indeed, President Ramos felt that he could do more, and he has laid the foundations for the economic progress of the country. And to that extent, he may be correct, and therefore he felt that he should be allowed another term or an extension in order to finish the job that he has set out to do himself. On the other hand, Cory felt that there will be we must follow the Constitution. We must have a fresh mandate after 6 years, and therefore there was really a difference in opinion. And the Catholic Church were also against that term extension. The PIRMA, which was led by some of his very close lieutenants. So it was a policy issue, And both President Cory and President Ramos availed of the constitutional and democratic process to push for the principles that they believe in. So the rest is history. The Supreme Court struck it down on the basis of what they believe is the way the Constitution is written.
Well, was it a long-term rift between the two of them? Did it cause a long-term rift?
Did it cause a long-term rift? No, not from where I sat. Everyone concluded that, it was a difference in opinion, and so they pushed for their principles. In our political history, I mean, it's not unusual. We went through the basis agreement. President Cory pushed for it. The Senate, led by the late Joey Salonga, opposed it, and at the end of the day, the structures of democracy prevailed, and therefore we continued to espouse on policies that each of us believe is good for the country.
Ano pong work ethic niya noon? I remember that ang aga gumising. I remember that his work day started really early. At least that's what I was hearing from the Malacanang reporters. No, parang pati sila hirap na hirap kumain.
In law, Luchi, we have what we call sui generis, one of a kind, and that is how I would describe the work habits of President Ramos. One of a kind. As I said earlier, after working long in Malacanang, pagdating niya sa bahay niya, doon muna siya sa auto, sa sasakyan niya, and would review all the papers. Number two, he reads everything.
Yeah.
And it is oftentimes when he gives back the memo that you gave to him with the marginal notes, very simple, in red ballpen.
Yes.
We see CSW. And when I was not familiar with his work style, I could not figure out what CSW means until I was told that it means complete staff work. So he was known for that. So when I got him as Ninong for my marriage 25 years ago, he asked me, was there a complete staff work?
Speaking of complete staff work, ito, maisisingit ko na yung FBR story ko. I did not cover Malacanang. I was covering the Quezon Circle at that time. So environment, agriculture, agrarian reform. Fulgencio Factoran was environment secretary. And I remember we did a story on illegal logging with some military unit supposedly implicated in some province. And I remember Secretary Factoran calling me to his office and handing me one of those handwritten marginal notes and in the red pen and saying, look at this. You're getting all of us into trouble. And Fidel, FVR basically had a marginal note there and said, look into this. And specifically, he specified the military unit, the head of that unit, that he wants the secretary. But for me as a journalist, it was just, well, one, flattering, di ba? I mean, for somebody who never really covered Malacanang. But also, I was just amazed. You would hear about him being a workaholic, but to see it actually in black and white and in red, that his hand actually touched your story and paid it that much attention to essentially give a directive to the secretary. It was amazing attention to detail.
Yes, that's a very apt description. Amazing attention to details, and indeed, he reads everything that you present to him, and therefore you must be ready to defend what you wrote there. Because, as I would repeat, his favorite question was complete staff work done for this. And in other words, that also I read it to mean that I want to be confident that what we'll be doing is correct. We have to make a judgment call. Oftentimes, every day we make judgment calls, but those judgments must be based on a reasonable degree of research and on the facts. And that is why he always would ask anyone to do complete research, complete staff work, because before the matter is presented to him for final decision. Because he would keep on saying, you know, the buck stops in my table, and therefore I cannot afford to have lousy staff work or memos in front of me.
Na. Senator Drilon, final question na lang po before we let you go. Up until his last years and days, he was very, very active. He would challenge people to a handshake, patagalan ng grip, di ba? Palakasan ng grip, really showing off his strength. But I imagine you've had some occasion to meet him, na kumustahin siya, and so on. How did he feel about the country, the direction of the country, the current nature of the country before in his final days?
Are you asking me
Yes.
how I feel about the way things are?
How did FVR feel about the country, if he had any occasion to
I
tell?
have no occasion to discuss that with him. You know, we meet. Years ago, I was once or twice, I went to see him in his office, but afterwards, we didn't have that much occasion to officially interact. But indeed, in the cocktail parties, where I would see him, you know, he has not changed his warmth to people and the respect he concedes to people. Hindi po, he's very, well, during his presidency, he respected his office. Hindi po niya binastos sa opisina niya. Hindi po siya nagmumura. Hindi, you know, when he disagrees with you, it is a very disrespectful disagreement, nothing personal. That is why he is well respected, but beyond being well respected, he was well loved by our people.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Senator Franklin Drilon. Senator Drilon, of course, was Justice Secretary during the time of President FVR. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Salamat, sir.
And we'll continue our conversation with another former official of the late Fidel V. Ramos administration. Keep it right here on One News. The Chiefs will be right back. We're still talking about the life and legacy of former President Fidel V. Ramos. Joining us now via Zoom was his former labor official, Lenny De Jesus. Lenny, welcome to the Chiefs.
Hi,
Evening,
Roby.
ma'am.
Good evening. First, Roby, I was not a labor official under FVR.
Oh,
I was the presidential
with the
management
PMS,
staff.
yes.
Yeah,
We apologize
PMS.
for that. Actually, I was looking forward to asking you about the PMS nga because we were talking about kung gaano ka-workaholic si President Ramos and how he was able to stay on top of literally thousands of documents. Maybe you could give us your personal insights on was it all just hard work? Or was he also institutionalizing things at the PMS and in Malacanang for that matter?
Yeah, good evening, Roby Luchi. Long time no see. And
Hi, ma'am.
yeah, I started working with FBR. Well, I met him during the time of President Aquino when he was Secretary of National Defense, and I was already working in Malacanang. And I somehow saw that FBR was really so concerned about our country. And at the time that President Aquino launched, if you remember, the Kabisig People's Movement,
Yes.
do you remember that? Which was launched by President Aquino during the time that there were so many protest rallies and her ratings were quite low and she was worried about it. So she decided to put up this Kabisig People's Movement. And we had all the cabinet members supporting it. But the most supportive of them all was FVR. And so that's how I got to know him because I was assigned to take care of the Kabisig People's Movement for President Aquino when I was in Malacanang at the time. And I saw how patriotic President FVR was and how the life of the nation was so important to him as a person. And even then, I was really hoping and wishing that he would become our president. And well, that wish came true. So I started working with him from the time he was proclaimed president-elect. Because he was proclaimed president-elect, he already told me that he wanted me to be his PMS head. And he also gave instructions on what to do as soon as he takes his oath.
So how was it trying to keep up with his being a workaholic, getting up at 4 a.m., all of these things that people are hearing?
I actually developed heart palpitation as I was working with FBR because FBR was perfectionist. I mean, he's very charming to others. He's very charming to the press when we have meetings and everything. But to us as his staff, he can be very, very strict, and he demands perfection from the work that we do for him. We could not complain, however, because we could see that whatever it is he is asking of us, he can also do himself. So he starts working at about 4 a.m.
Wow.
And by the time I get to my office at about 7 a.m., I would get a lot of these memos with the red ball pen writing marginal notes, which would simply say, for 8 PMS, for CSW, NLT, that means for the head of the presidential management staff, for complete staff work, no later than. So usually no later than is about a day, sometimes a week, and we have to make sure that when we submit the work, it is perfect. And when he says CSW, that means that the memo that we get back to him will have all the necessary information that he needs to know. There should be a summary of about no longer than 2 pages. It should not be longer than 2 pages. And it has to come up with a single recommendation for him to approve or disapprove. And if it is approved, the action document is already attached to it for his signature. Whether it's a memo order, executive order, proclamation, or whatever. So, and if it is for a project, we also come up with an implementation plan, which will be part of the instructions to be given to the concerned official. And when that is approved, it is also our duty in PMS to make sure that we monitor the implementation of that particular directive.
So,
Now-
ma'am, linawin ko lang parang because it's such a great insight. We've been hearing about complete staff work for the longest time. But essentially, you're saying what counts as complete staff work? Complete information, 2 pages, may recommendation na, tapos nandun na rin yung draft ng order.
Correct. Completed staff work means that first that the problem is correctly identified and that there's a backgrounder so that he will have an idea of what exactly we are referring to. Okay, you can just imagine the scope of the work of the president, so at least it will put a context to it. And then you have to come up with an explanation of the possible solutions, the alternatives, the pros and cons of each of one of them, and make a recommendation and justify a recommendation and ensure him that the recommendation will not cause him a problem, because under the principles of completed staff work, we have always said that the staff or any subordinate has no right to give the boss a problem. So that is how it is. And however, while we have a summary, all the attached documents should be part of it. So in case he wants to double check what has been written there, it's available there. Now, if the president asks a question from the memo that we've given, that means we were not able to do complete staff work.
Nakakatakot naman yan.
Dapat kumpleto na lahat yun doon. Tapos, I mean, pag maayos yung, you know, at the level of the president, most decisions will have some benefits for some sectors and some disadvantage for other sectors. And we usually have to come up with something that would be for the greatest good of the greatest number. And for those possible disadvantages, we have to identify the possible mitigating actions that should be taken to lessen the adverse consequence, if there are any. But it is our duty as PMS to ensure that the recommendation we're giving will not really cause him a problem. Now, in addition to that, Roby, hindi pa yon. Kailangan, we will only use a particular font and with a particular margins. You know why? It's part of
Format
because the format is an assurance that it came from us. I mean,
Wow.
Okay.
So pati yun may security check, no?
Ano yung font? Ano yung font?
Yes.
because you know, if somebody gives him a memo, and it is very easy, because if it's not in that particular font and format, halata ka agad.
May nagsingit. May nagsingit.
Ganun.
So what happens if you fail? What happens? Kasi I know for a fact na marunong siya magalit eh.
Ay, nako, malimit
He can
magalit.
be impatient, di ba? In fact, I know for a fact na nagmumuras siya. Although, of course, not in public. So maybe you can tell us firsthand, paano pag nagbuisit? Paano pag naaragagalit?
And not really in front of me, but then, you know, after me, the document goes to his inner office, where you have somebody listing down all the documents that have been received, and where you have to put all of the additional security measures like a hologram, the numbering, and
May
so on.
hologram pa.
May hologram, ano, at that time. And then, if there is a problem, they're saying that if there's something he didn't like, whether it is the recommendation itself, or even the form, or the grammar, or wrong syntax in your sentence, ibinabato niya yung papel.
Yes.
So obviously, so
Parang editor.
Hindi, kasi-
Kami na.
oh, how was your morning? Ma'am, nag-picking rice na naman kami. Sabi ko, ganun. But kasi meron kami natanggap na memo na hindi nagustuhan ni boss. So, binato niya sa amin lahat yung papel. So, they have to pick it up. And
Wow.
that's how difficult it is working with FBR. Although, I really miss working with somebody like him because, as has been said earlier, he reads all the documents and he takes it very seriously. But what is more important is you can only do CSW if there is a very clear vision and principle of governance that he is following, because without that, it will be difficult to come up with a context for the recommendations and decisions that you're making. But because FBR had a very clear vision of where he wanted to bring the country to, and not only that, it is not just talkies. I mean, it's not just talking about it in general terms, because the vision was translated to a specific course of action that had to be implemented by its specific department. They knew exactly their role in that particular vision. There was a roadmap. And the instructions to the department were eventually transformed into what we call the performance commitment system, where every cabinet member had to indicate their performance indicators based on their charters, their key result areas, with the timetable of their targets and the resources needed, the budget, so that there would be a synchronization of the work and the programs and the projects with the resources allocation. So I think I really admired FBR for having very, very good managerial skills, and it really made our bureaucracy functional. Government was functioning very well, which is actually something that you would see in most progressive nations. So, malinaw yung mundo namin.
But how was
Mahirap na lang.
but of course, that was FBR, the president, the professional. But how was he as a personal colleague, maybe, or a friend even? I mean, that side of him, can you tell us a little bit more about the part of him that's not the president, but
Not the president.
more the mentor, maybe, or the friend? Yeah.
I remember once, because I was having heart palpitations and I had a checkup. And I got into the cabinet meeting late with the 24-hour holster under my coat.
Yes.
And when he saw me coming in, he calls me and says, "Lika dito." Usually kasi when he calls you in a cabinet meeting, you have to stay by his side, short of, "Sir, ano ho yun?" And he says, "Nakita mo ba yung cabinet member natin? Ang dal-dal-dal-dal. Sabihin mo sa kanya. Pabawasan niya yung kanyang pinagsasasabi." Anyway,
Sino yun?
pag marami siyang ganong sinasabi na he doesn't like about what people are doing, what people he is meeting with, parang he is irritated by them. But of course, we cannot tell those people. So I go to the person and say, "Is it okay if you shorten your presentation because the president is in a hurry?" And so, when I said that, by goodness, I guess he got so tense and he got to be more talkative. And so, hindi mo ba sinabi sa kanya? Sinabi ko sa iyo. Something like that. So, it's a little scary. But there was one time that he called me, because I usually am at his back during cabinet meetings. He stood up. "Kita mo yung number na yan? Sinong gumawa ng number niyan sa memorandum order na yan?" I said, "Sir, hindi ho sa amin galing yan." "Ba't hindi mo alam? Dapat na lahat ng dadating dito, alam mo." "Sir, check ko ho." So I asked, "Saan ang galing to?" So it came from one of the department secretaries and it didn't go to PMS. And so the following day, I said, "Sir, if I cannot meet your standards, maybe it's time for me to resign." I said, "What? Ikaw ba pinapagalitan ko? Hindi naman ikaw pinagagalitan ko. Yung isang yung pinagagalitan ko, hindi ko lang masabi sa kanya." I mean, it's FBR. But personally, he's very caring. He, like one time I remember, he was saying that, "Oh, may kailangan ba kayo?" Yung gano'n, no? But that's the other part of FBR. Working for him so hard, but you are aware that he really cares for you as a person. And he checks, "Oh, kamusta yung pamilya mo?" Yung gano'n, "Okay naman, no, sir." So, it was really a very great privilege to have worked with FBR, and I think the greatest accomplishment of my life is having met his standards for work.
Yeah.
Kanina kausap ko si
Because,
kanina kausap ko si Manny Mugato, who also covered a lot of the president, and he said it was during FBR's time daw that the PMS started instituting barcodes on the documents, and sinabi niya that was one innovation that allowed them to really keep track of these thousands of documents and keeping track of complete staff work and no later done. And so, I mean, is that true? And what do you remember of that system?
we instituted a lot of systems, even when it came to the releasing of documents, because, we found out that certain corruption can happen during the transmission of released documents. And so we had to make sure that once it gets out, it gets to the recipient that same day. Now, for the incoming documents, as we said, we were very, very careful about the tracking of our documents. As a matter of fact, we had a document tracking system so that when we start a document and send it to a cabinet member, they have to fill that up, and we know exactly where the document gets stalled or where it stays longest.
Routing, yeah.
The routing, yeah. It's something that's very, very important to governance, no? And there were many other things that we instituted in PMS. By the way, I was also concurrently cabinet secretary because they wanted to make sure that there was consistency in whatever is being discussed in the cabinet and whatever PMS is doing, because we were supposed to be really monitoring the developments and the progress of work and the targets of all the department secretaries, including the GOCCs. And PMS also had regional operations, and we make sure that if there is any critical incident happening in the country, we will be informed right away, and we inform the president. So,
Kaya ka ba naging Dragon Lady? Kasi I remember that you had that moniker because you were so powerful. That's the perception, no?
yeah, I was called the Dragon Lady. Well, I guess it's because I did my work the way I am used to, like an academician. I really was not that honed on political matters or trying to please somebody or accommodating somebody. It was, based on what is right and what is legal. By the way, one of the main principles of CSW is that the recommendation has to be legal. The recommendation should be doable. I mean, physically and financially feasible. The recommendation has to be politically correct. Physical and financially feasible. That means that you will have the resources to be able to do it. No? So, well, I was called the Dragon Lady because people thought that in the beginning, when a number of former officials were removed and replaced, that I had something to do with it. It's not true. So, just to show you how caring FBR can be. But you know what I noticed about FBRs? while he really is that caring, parang he tries to control his emotion. Parang he's a military man. You should keep that kind of an image, diba? But he said, one time he called the press secretary and said, "Hoy, sabihin mo naman dyan sa media, tigilan na si Lenny ng tawag ng Dragon Lady kasi nakakaawa na." And then he said, but then he followed it, "Alam mo kasi, naalala ko yung Terry and the Pirates." Sabi ko, "Ano yung Terry and the Pirates?" And one of you know what Terry and the Pirates is. I started researching. Yung palang Terry and the Pirates is a comic strip sometime in the 50s where there was a mean dragon lady.
Oh, ikaw ang naalala niya doon.
Inaalala niya. Kawawa naman daw ako. Treated like the dragon lady in that cartoon character, Terry and the Pirates.
Politically correct, what do you mean by politically correct? Correct sa political parties or
No.
what we mean by now in
Yeah,
the context of what we know?
Yeah, thanks for the question because we have to really clarify what we mean by politically correct. Politically correct is defined as this recommendation that would be for the greatest good of the greatest number. It has nothing to do with political parties or political personalities. It is what is going to produce the best benefits with the least cost in terms of benefiting people. Yung dami ng makikinabang, ganun.
When did you last see him? When did you last have time to speak with him?
I was with him for the Christmas party with his former cabinet members, December 2019, just before the lockdown.
Okay. Ma'am?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Luchi.
Did you get to see him during his moments of struggles with health? Because parang all of a sudden kasi nawala siya sa public view, no?
No, he was still okay then. As a matter of fact, I do remember sometime after that, he even made a statement publicly about an issue. I think
yes, right.
his health deteriorated only this year, or I think during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Did you get to talk to him then during that time?
Not anymore because we were no longer allowed to visit him. But when I saw him that Christmas party, he was still very, very caring and say, "Oh, kamusta ka na? Oh, Miss CSW, kamusta ka na?" So,
Ikaw pala ang CSW.
We've been talking about CSW a lot, and I imagine it might really benefit a lot of people just watching. I mean, the whole concept of CSW. I'm curious, how did it impact your work? I mean, and all of the cabinet. I mean, I imagine a lot. Was this a culture that was eventually downloaded and maybe propagated in different departments or wherever FBR people ended up?
yeah. Well, the duty to ensure that it is done in CSW rests basically at the time with PMS. In other words, cabinet members would submit their memo and it is up to us to check whether it is complete, it is accurate, it is properly documented, and then we have to come up with our own summary of what they have submitted, and it has to be in that CSW format that will be acceptable to FBR. So unless we have the complete information and we have the complete options, then we do not submit it. And also, we check with our legal counsel whether it is legal, everything is perfectly in order. We also check with the concerned departments if they have been consulted about this, because there is nothing that can go to the president that would not have been coordinated with all other concerned government offices, because one of the principles that FBR had during his presidency was that government officials should not be expressing conflicts with other government officials publicly.
Yeah.
Because if they had problems, it has to be resolved by us. They have to take it to us, and then we can come up with one front. At least it shows a president in control, and the president was properly coordinated and collaborated all the government officials. He really is a good manager. And I thought I had always advocated for the practice of good management that will ensure the proper solution to our country's problems. We were always reminded about our bottom lines for the different areas, and so we know exactly how we were going to achieve those because they were based on targets and performance indicators that we have discussed with the concerned department secretaries. And these are monitored, by the way, and evaluated every quarter.
Okay. Ma'am Lenny De Jesus, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but certainly we know that the storytelling and the remembrances and the honoring for FBR will continue in the coming days. We appreciate your time to share with us your insights and your moments with FBR. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for allowing me the chance to be able to remember how great FBR is as a leader. I mean, I deeply grieve his loss, but I am consoled with the fact that he has himself immortalized himself through his works and his good leadership for the country. He's a true patriot.
Thank you, ma'am.
Maraming salamat
Well
po.
said.
Lenny
Thank
De
you.
Jesus,
Thank you,
former
ma'am.
chief
Thank you very much.
of the Presidential Management Staff. And that's it for the chiefs.
Thank you.
We hope what was discussed here will keep the
Bye.
conversation going. Ako po si Roby Alampay.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz-Valdes of News 5.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.